think we are live. Just double check and we get started, guys. Are we live? Are we live? Looks like we might be. Guys, today's session, to start off with, before I go into Q&A, I'm going to be talking about the question, when can you go back to working out normally after you've had a herniated disc, and hopefully give you guys a few little bits of guidance. And we're talking about herniated disc down in the lower back. First things first, most of you guys, a significant majority, are going to have herniated discs, bulging discs, slip discs, whatever you want to call them, injuries that are the root cause of your lower back pain or sciatica down here in the last two segments of the lumbar spine. We're talking L4-5 and L5-S1. And so that's where these injuries are going to arise. And what do you classically see with these kind of problems? You see that the person cannot load bear effectively or has significant limitation in load bearing. They have significant limitation in moving in certain positions. They find that when you bend one way or another, you move the spine in a certain direction or another direction, you find that you get that flaring up of lower back pain because you put the spine into a vulnerable position, a position it is not happy to be in. And so we end up getting a flare up. It sets us back. Now, we get a lot of questions, and we've had a good few recently of people really thinking about getting back into the gym. Yeah, I want to go and I want to train arms, I want to do chest press, etc. But I've got really bad sciatica. What am I going to do here? And it's something that is worthy of consideration. And I think too often people are so focused on getting back into the gym and doing that other work, the mirror muscles, let's say, that they forsake the lower back. And often we're trying to work out because we want to have longevity. We want to have a strong, healthy back for the long term. We don't want to have this vulnerability where we go and pick up a water bottle and all of a sudden we've got raging sciatica for the next 3 weeks. Like, it's no good. And so we really want to have a good strategy. And in our impatience to get back to training the mirror muscles, biceps, chest, etc., we're forsaking our lumbar spine. And if we can just have a bit of poise to focus on the essentials, we can get back to working out like quote unquote normal, in no time at all. And so a couple of things to consider if we're kind of trying to get a formula for going back into the gym. And the very first is be honest with yourself. This is why exercises in spine stability are so helpful. Because if you're doing a hip hinge, you're doing a squat, you're going to do that when you go and do the bicep curls, and you're going to do that when you go and do the chest press machine or the bench press machine, because you're going to sit down and you're going to pick up the weights. And so to demonstrate both of these things, so things are very, very clear, when I'm going to go and do my biceps, I might have, all right arms, and I'm going to go and do a lightweight, and I'm going to go pick up the 10 kilos over here. You better believe I've just done a hip hinge. When I go put them down on the bench, I've done a hip hinge. When I go and sit down to do my bench press, I'm going to do a squat. So if I'm worried about doing a 5, 10 kilo, let alone a body weight squat, then why am I considering going and training arms for fun in the gym and being impatient about that fact? So just take a moment. One of the really important things that you need to understand is you're not working out doing your rehab for rehab's sake. You're doing your rehab because those specific exercises are actually going to be there to build resilience outside of the gym, not just inside it. And so there's many spillover benefits, purposes to the specific exercises that we talk about often on the program and on these lives. So just bear that in mind. And then there's some considerations, right? We talk about 3 numbers for each and every one of you. And do this calculation, maybe make a few notes and do it for yourself, right? I weigh about 93 kilos. So I want to look at what am I putting my spine through load-wise? What is my actually putting this back through on a daily basis, even when I'm sitting, right? Because when we sit, we put 40 to 90% more load through the lumbar spine. And so if half of my body weight, roughly speaking, is about 50 kilos, for ease of numbers, when I'm sitting down, I'm putting anywhere from 20 to 45 kilos extra through my lumbar spine, extra strain through this lower back down here. Force, if you will. And so if I'm still in a position where I'm not even using 10, 15 kilos, then I need to focus on that first. Build up some good strength and stability first before I worry about being able to train arms. Because if we're so very vulnerable, we can't even pick up that kind of weight, we're in a bit of an issue. So that's the first 2 figures, the 40 and the 90%. For me, that's 20 kilos and 45 kilos. And then for the guys, typically speaking, you want to be shooting for around about 100% of your body weight on the bar on either a squat or a hip hinge, or both. It doesn't really matter, right? But these are indications of little milestones along the way. So in those numbers that I've just said for me specifically, you do your own maths. You've got 20 kilos, 45 kilos, 90 kilos, right? I should be able to do aggravation-free with correct choreography 10 reps without being worried about my back. And if I'm getting to that point, obviously the further through that scale you go, ladies, we tend to shoot for about 75% of body weight rather than 100% of body weight, just to make maths more complicated for you. As I'm on my way for that, I'll be able to start adding in other things. But please don't get caught out in that position where you're struggling to even do something very, very simple and you're worried about why you can't train arms. So hopefully that really helps you guys get a better understanding. Just a couple of questions I'm going to go through here. Oscar on YouTube. Hi Mike, how are you? I'm very well. I'm very well. Hope you are too. I have a question. I did a squat on the core workout 3. Okay. Workout, I'm assuming we're talking about phase 3. Should I do a hip hinge the next day or the same day, I think you mean? So generally speaking, when you're going through the workouts, definitely at the phase 3 and phase 4 level, you really want to be doing only one workout a day. The idea of our workouts, so there's different purposes and different ways in which we approach the workouts at different phases of the program, different phases of the recovery. And the program is just there to give a simple journey through the recovery process. So at what we call phase 1, you're just learning things, you're doing it every day. But when we're in phase 4 or phase 3, and certainly phase 4, that's where you're working out hard, right? You need to get in, do your workout, and then go home. Often, and I would suggest you've got to watch out for this, Oscar, specifically because of your profession, there's this temptation to try and do more than we actually can. And we get into this situation of under recovery from our workouts rather than, and arguably overtraining. So get in, do your hard workout, and then go home, right? Or go and do something else. Do some of your care of self stuff to help the adaptation. That's really what I'd be focusing on doing. I wouldn't be doing the same day workouts. Maybe later on, right? If you really, really have to, but I'd suggest there's more use in working other areas rather than just hammering the same, working out twice a day. That would be, I think, too much for you, generally speaking. The other question we had was, is it okay to sit on a soft chair or a hard? You can sit on whatever chair you want at the stage you're in, Oscar, but just try and think about that neutral spine position. So if you're sat there afterwards doing, like this, that's not going to be ideal, right? Sat with a rounded lower back. That's really not going to be helpful for you. So you want to try and keep a little bit more mobile. Like this chair is really great because I can kind of just perch on the edge of it like so, and I keep my spine in a pretty neutral position. And obviously just being a little bit more active, right? Not just camping out for the next 2 hours doing client emails, for example, right? That's not going to be such a good idea. That might get you into a little bit of trouble. What have we got on TikTok here? We've got, I'm just trying to read back through some of these. Guys, I'm going to go through questions now. I've been talking enough, so I'll run through some of these questions that you guys have posted here. Just trying to find the first one coming in. Post any more down below, guys, if you're on YouTube. If you're on TikTok, post them in here and I'll run through these now. Poppy has said how to get rid of a lump or knot out of the left side of the SI joint. Been seeing a physio. I'd suggest that, well, we need more context there, I'm afraid, Poppy. Often, one of the things I do find is like, back is a bony area. And when we injure our back, we all of a sudden start digging around in this area and it's a little bit bumpy. We've got lymph nodes near the surface, all that other kind of stuff. And we're like, oh, there's a knot. And we end up like creating more trouble, right? Poking stuff that actually was there long before we had back pain, but we never had cause to dig around in our lumbar spine like we do when we have pain. And so just be mindful of that. If you've got an injury, Poppy, then focus on dealing with the injury, and that's going to be strengthening work, right? That's strengthening up your lower back. Don't get caught out in these kind of quote-unquote knots. It might be literally, some tissue that was already there long before you've actually injured your back. Just something to think about. And also rubbing the knot isn't really going to do too much. E has said, do I get an injection? I've been doing physio for 6 months. E, the most important question is, what have you been doing for your physio? What specific work have you been doing? If like in most cases, you've been given, some knee hugs, some child's pose, cat-cow, rocking your knees left to right, all of that kind of stuff, then you haven't done proper rehabilitation. You've done some stuff, right? But you may as well have been like having coffee and doing some stuff in the garden. It's not structured. It's not a rehab approach. So if you go to your physiotherapist, your osteopath, your chiropractor, and by the way, this is not at all a dig at any of those professions. There are good and bad in all professions, all walks of life. If you get given a sheet of exercises, they do these at home, that's not rehab. I repeat, that is not rehab. That is just random stuff that's put together. There is no instruction. A program of rehabilitation is a structured thing that evolves over time. You're not going to put it on a sheet. You might put it in a binder that thick, but you're not putting it on a sheet. For reference, the Back in Shape program, for example, our program, we've just been through a major overhaul. You've got literally hundreds of videos there. And then you have support along the way. That is a rehab program. The stuff that so many of you guys think is physio is really just, it's just a shopping list of random stuff to do, right, at home to keep you quiet. And that is as close to the wire as it gets. Essie has said she's sitting in a chiropractor waiting room as I watch. I hope it's helpful for you. Understand the very important thing that whether you're seeing an osteopath, a chiropractor, a physio, whoever, they can help you in that clinical appointment. And most of the time, they're going to be doing stuff to work on other areas, right? It might not be that they're able to work on that direct section of the lumbar spine because of they maybe don't have technologies and things like that to target those areas. For example, we've got the decompression in the other room, which allows us to actually decompress the L5-S1, for example, or the L4-5. We've got the laser, we can target the injured tissue. A lot of times your chiro is going to be doing some really valuable work. They're getting your neck moving a bit better, thoracic moving a bit better. They're getting your hips moving a little bit better and helping with those things. But the proviso should always be that you're doing the rehab work. You're doing the rehab work outside of the appointment. Because you don't walk out of that chiropractic appointment, although you might feel better, which is fantastic, you don't walk out of there any more healed. Because healing takes place in longer than a half an hour appointment, or a 20-minute appointment, or an hour appointment. Healing takes place over a longer period of time. So they can really be part and parcel of your recovery process. But just make sure you appropriately understand where they fit into that process. So very important. He said the physio only helped with normal sciatic pain in the glutes and back. Awesome. What else have we got here? We've got get the mouse in the right place. Would you recommend exercise daily or with more break days? If body weight, would it be daily and then at least one set? The big thing with your exercise and your rehabilitation, this is why it's not just a sheet of paper, is that it is not just like one thing, right? Even though you're doing the same exercises over a long period of time, as someone like Oscar will say, it's done differently as you go through the process. So when you're starting out with your rehabilitation, you do it daily and you're playing around with the individual exercises. You might be spending 15 minutes working on a hip hinge, 20 minutes working on a squat. You know, a little bit later in the day, you spend some time working on a dead bug, figuring out how you can actually perform the exercises safely and effectively in a way that doesn't aggravate your spine. And it might be that you have to do easier versions, and that's perfectly okay. Because the biggest thing you'll struggle with is actually controlling this area of the lower back to create stability, which is what you're learning. If you were already perfect at it, you wouldn't be, struggling here. So that's important. But then as you start to put that into a routine, that changes over time. And in those early stages, yes, you do it daily, because everything else you're going to do every single day is going to be problematic. It's going to be the areas where you flare yourself up. Reaching for the water bottle, getting dressed in the morning. We've commented here, when would you allow cycling around the city? Focus on doing the rehabilitation work, make some significant progress there, and then you can worry about adding in other hobbies. But you need to make substantial progress on the rehab front. And understand that much of what you're doing every single day is going to be more strenuous than the rehabilitation exercises themselves. So just devote time, effort, and energy to really get that stuff right. Just coming on here, move that out of the way. Back to TikTok. Can we do weightlifting with a flat back? Many people that have a long-standing lower back injury, so let me rephrase this. Most of you guys are going to have normal lumbar anatomy, meaning you have a lordosis in the lower back, a curve. Some of you, if you have a persuasion to have an increased or a reduced lumbar curve, and with a reduced lumbar curve, you're going to have a posterior pelvic tilt. With an increased lumbar curve, you're going to generally have an anterior pelvic tilt. It's not always the case. There are examples of that where the opposite is true, but there are reasons for that, which I won't go into now. If you're likely to have any variation from the normal, it's more likely to be flattened. And the thing you need to focus on is you do the rehab work. You do the strengthening work. You're already living life every day with a flattened lumbar spine, if it is actually flattened and you've measured it and you know that it's 37.5% reduced in lumbar curve, right? You should have that numbers. Otherwise, kind of disregard it. You are doing things every single day with that reduced lumbar curve. So you may as well do some rehab, because the rehab's going to help you, right? Just going and doing weightlifting implies you're just going to do some random stuff in the gym, right? That's not rehab. Again, focus on doing your rehab. Your rehab is going to involve load at some point, and it's going to steadily involve increasing the load through time. But one of the things that we've really changed over the years is that I think it's better if you focus on rebuilding strength, stability, control, poise for your lumbar spine, so that later on you can go about doing some remodeling work, changing the lumbar curve, reintroducing the lumbar curve through stretching exercises such as using the Denerol, for example, which works, right? But do that later, because it's a bit of an uncomfortable process in of itself. Some more questions coming in here. Guys, if you're on YouTube, you got any questions, you can post them down in the comments. Just going through the TikTok comments at the moment. Burning pain in my glute, tingling down the leg, MRI said disc, but managed to play football. That's awesome, but do the rehab work, right? Just because you can do things with a disc bulge or disc herniation doesn't mean you don't do the rehab, right? It would be smarter if you didn't do football and you focused on the rehab for a period of time, because football just has unnecessary risk. It just has unnecessary risk. And if you focus on building good strength and stability back into the lumbar spine, you'll find you can enjoy football for much longer, as opposed to just having a bit of bad luck, falling awkwardly, and then we make the back a whole lot worse. You know, you can still fall with a healthy back and injure yourself, right? You can still do that, but it's better if you focus on some rehabilitation, so you've at least got some objective gauge on how strong or not your back actually is. We can't be thinking that, you know, I can't lift more than 5 kilos on a squat, but I'm happy to go and run around and play football for an hour, you know, and then wondering why we're getting this recurrent back pain that's, you know, one day on, one day off, one day on, one day off. It's the wrong way to be. Focus on doing the right stuff first and then add in the fun stuff afterwards. Part of the reason we're struggling so much is because we haven't done the right stuff in the first instance. I have no problems with squats, but I can barely do the hip hinge, I'm assuming. Only very small amounts of movement. D243 has asked. This is very, very common. A lot of people, if they can do one or other of the squat or hip hinge, they'll be able to do the squat, but then they do the hip hinge and they're like, ouch, ouch, ouch. And you see why? Because they struggle to actually do the hip hinging motion, just bending out the hips. What are we doing when we do a hip hinge? We are separating out lumbar movement from hip movement, and mean move the hips only and the lumbar spine doesn't move. If you can't do a hip hinge, you're probably doing your hamstring stretch wrong as well, because most people, when they do a hamstring stretch, I saw these cool mobility things, right? I saw them, you guys have probably seen them online because everybody's doing mobility stuff and everybody's got a mobility program these days, but a bit hyperbolic perhaps. But these people were like, albeit very, very flexible, right? But they're like, oh, this is how you open up your hips. And then they're just basically, you can see their lumbar spine just buckling as they're doing it. Granted, they've got really good hip flexibility, but like 80% of the extra range of motion that they're doing there to open out the hips is all coming from the lumbar spine. And most people will be like this, really, you know, through the hamstring. And it's just like, yeah, look, I'm stretching my hamstrings. It's like, no, you're not. You're just rounding your lower back. You're just rounding your lower back over and over again, because they don't have the ability to move the hips only. And that's something that takes time to learn. And it's very, very normal to really struggle with this stuff. So don't feel disheartened if you are struggling with the hip hinge. It's something that you have to learn. I'll demonstrate a little tactic that you guys can use to hopefully help you improve your hip hinge in 30 seconds. Well, it might make an instant difference, but let's see. So we get a band, and ideally you want a strong band. This is something we talked through in the program, and I'm a bit limited with the setup here. The most important thing we do when we get this is we put it in the right actual place. Too many people will put it in the wrong place. You find the bony bits on the front of your hips here, and you come down about an inch. Yes, I do have peculiarly long legs compared to the length of my body. What we're looking for is the band should not be here. Those bony bits were here and here. If we come down about an inch, you're right on the front of the hip socket. So what we're trying to do is have the band here and then pushing the hip socket backwards like so. That's the purpose of the band here. It helps you do the movement. And obviously you need a strong band, otherwise it's not strong enough to actually pull you. It's helpful if you have it slightly higher than the waist, but not essential. You don't want it lower, otherwise it's going to pull you into the ground. And then what we do is we get inside our band and we walk away a little bit and put it down to that point. I find the bony bits, come down a little bit, and now I just engage my core, I stand nice and tall, slight bend in the knees, and I just let the band pull me backwards. And it helps you actually bend from the hips and hip hinge only. I think about tension in my lower back, I think about tension in my core, and I just let the band pull me backwards. As opposed to what so many people do is bend forwards. You see, my back didn't move, my bum didn't move. Here, this is what so many people do when they try and do a hip hinge, which is why it hurts. As opposed to let the hips just move backwards. And that is it's a really, really good little drill that can help you guys get the hip hinge right. Really worth doing and playing around with. But it's just about learning this movement. And don't take it for granted that you can already do it. Another great one is the tape test. Sticks tape along the lumbar spine. If you guys haven't seen it, just send us a DM. Those of you on TikTok, send us a DM, or in the comments, you can post in the comments if you're watching this after the fact. And we can put a link in there for the tape test video, which shows you how to use tape test to better understand that your spine is staying still when you're doing these kind of movements. It'll really help you learn this movement, but just don't be disheartened. A lot of people really suck at it. And once you learn it, it allows you to do a bunch of other stuff that's helpful in a more helpful way. Fireboy, what have you got? Fireboy has said, I have a posterior pelvic tilt and have a disc bulge at 3, 4, 4, 5, and 3, 4, and 4, 5. I'm 22 years from India. Any help? The main thing that you do is you get started with some education. You start to understand what's going on, right? It's in this sort of scenario, the posterior pelvic tilt flattens the lumbar curve, right? If we've got a normal neutral lumbar spine and we posterior tilt, we get a flattened lumbar curve. So that means we put pressure on the disc. So that's not helpful, right? And so things like the towel exercise are really, really helpful for offsetting that and supporting the natural healthy lumbar curve. We do our relief-based practices. Fireboy will probably really struggle with doing the hip hinge, and you're gonna have to learn it. And that's gonna really, really help you, and it's gonna take some time. And then over time, you're gonna do your rehabilitation exercises. That stuff, the towel decompression, things like the hamstring stretching, contrast bathing. You can use things like the cube over here. This is awesome, you know, that kind of stuff. That is all there to relieve stress and strain, but you must be doing your rehab stuff. That's your squats, your dead bugs, your marching bridges, your hip hinges, your single leg hip hinges, your step ups. That's about building strength and resilience back into that lower back to protect the L3-4 and L4-5. And then you build from there, you just progress. And obviously you've got that overarching element of education. And guys, those of you, if you need help with that kind of stuff, check out the link in the profile page. I'll paste it into the chat on YouTube so you guys can check it out afterwards. But go and check it out, because that gives you the structure that you need to help these kind of things. Christian has said, on a lot of forums, people say if you can't raise your toe or have motor loss, you need surgery. I don't agree, but what's your view? I think there's a lot of people that also say after they've had surgery, they still have the inability to lift that foot, which is difficult, right? I think the nuances need to be discussed. And I think what people are saying on forums one way or another is perhaps not as helpful. I think one of the main things from a red flag point of view is that we've got cauda-equina syndrome, that we've got saddle anesthesia, loss of bladder and bowel control. We need to be mindful of those kind of symptoms. We certainly do. That's really important. But if we don't have those, or a traumatic onset, right? So say you fell out of the window just up here onto your back, and then you've got raging back pain and sciatica, like go and get someone to see it, get it checked out with urgency. But most people don't have that. And so in that scenario, crack on. And then you'll see all sorts of different variations of symptoms. Everybody in here in the chat, most of you guys have predominantly L4-5 and L5-S1 issues in the lumbar spine. But lots of you have lots of variation in symptoms. Some of you just have sciatica. Some of you have back pain. Some of you have a mix of both. Some of you have never had any back pain, but you've just got that sensation in your big toe, right? And if you bend your back, it makes it worse. You know, you don't need different things for those different symptoms. You need to do the same stuff to rebuild a healthy spine. Fireboy said, my hamstrings are tight and I've got lower back injury last year, as we've discussed in the comments. Yep, you need to do the rehab work. And it's very, very common to get hamstring stiffness, tightness, tension. And your hamstrings play a role in maintaining that flatness of the lumbar spine. Your hamstrings are also controlled by the sections of the lower lumbar spine that go out to those hamstrings and tell them to tighten up. And so it's very, very, very normal to have hamstring tightness when we have a lower back injury. Just looking at some more on here. What have we got? We've done that one. Guys, any more comments as I'm going through these, please do post them down here. Is doing a plank good? I don't think the plank is very good. There's a couple of reasons for the plank, the straight plank, and why I don't think it's good. Number one, the straight plank is basically the reverse of a provocative disc test called Milgram's test, where you basically lie down with the legs stuck out. It's just a maximal compression of the L5-S1 disc. And also like really, really difficult to scale, right? When should you have stopped? How long are you holding it for? Did you get bored? I think it's a very useless exercise to practice, and it's not really, there's so many other more effective ones, quite frankly, that are going to help you better than just doing plank. So I just think it's a bit of a poor exercise choice, personally. We've got another question here. How long does it take for the nerves to recover from a lumbar fusion? It's not the nerves that are recovering, right? If there was significant damage to the nerves specifically, as opposed to irritation, if the irritation is gone, then the nerve symptoms will go, right? So you'll get some people where there's nerve irritation from the lower back, and then the person, and that's causing the pain that goes down the leg, in the case of sciatica, and they go and have a microdiscectomy, for example, and they remove the bit of disc, and that symptom's gone. It's gone. The irritation's gone. So if that's the case, then it can be instant. But if there's a degree of nerve damage as a result of whatever it may be, and sometimes there's a degree of nerve damage as a result of the surgery itself, which can happen. Sometimes people who've had microdiscectomies notice afterwards there's a bit of residual numbness that wasn't there before, and it's just a case of that nerve needs to heal. Nerves heal very, very slowly. So if there was an element of nerve damage, they heal very, very slowly. The main thing that you need to think about with the lumbar fusion is that the soft tissues around there, irrespective of the nerve isn't really that important in this whole picture. It's the tissues that are damaged that have irritated the nerve, not the nerve itself. And so the nerve is the thing that motivates us to do anything, but it is the injury to the spine that is the thing that needs to heal. Now, healing times of ligamentous tissues are slow. You're talking about months, and you need to do the rehabilitation work, because in the time that we've been less active, we will have lost muscle mass. Muscle mass plays a protective role for the lower back in a significant way. And so you need to go about rebuilding that control and that strength, and the control comes first and the strength comes second. And if you don't do that, then the area is going to remain vulnerable. The idea of doing that sooner rather than later is because you're having to live every day doing all sorts of things, such as getting dressed in the morning, going downstairs, going to the bathroom, all that kind of stuff. And none of that is focused around your back. That's just living life. So you need to be doing some element of spine stability work to protect that area, because if we've had a fusion, instead of having all of these joints, we've got one less. And now we've got one less joint. All the others are going to be under more strain if we don't know how to use our spine correctly and how to protect that area correctly. Because now when you're being lax and bending the spine in certain ways, or get given the instruction, which I would disagree with, of bending and twisting your spine again, that's going to be a problem, because the spine doesn't know that there's one less joint. So what happens is this one that's been fused doesn't move, and so the one above and the one below starts to take more strain. And that's where you see this classic example of, well, I had L5-S1 fused, and then 6 months later I had L4-5 go herniate. Well, that's because we haven't been given the appropriate rehab and guidance. That's why those things happen. Is it okay to feel the calves while doing RDLs? Yeah, but I think you're probably keeping your legs too straight. So have a slight kink in the knees. The kink should not change, but have a slight kink in the knees. When people are doing RDLs, I do think it's incorrect. I think you're just straining the knee to have the leg locked out like so, and then doing RDL. Right? I think this is just incorrect. But if you've got a slight bend in the knee and then you're doing the RDL, I think that's better. Is it bad that you're feeling tension in the calves? Not really. But it might be that you're pushing the weight too far forwards, and that's forcing you forwards, so you're having to press your toes into the ground. That could also be a factor. Is the goal not to round the back as much as possible, Clarence has asked? Yes, while you are recovering, you want to focus on a neutral spine and not bend the lumbar spine. That is your goal. Now, the reality is you're probably not going to get your underwear on in the morning without rounding the lower back in some way, shape or form. But before, you didn't care about it. It wasn't even on your radar. So even if you can bring that down by like 90%, that's going to be helpful. And so just being aware of it makes a massive difference. We say, don't round the back at all, right? But I know that's not realistic. But if I say, oh, only round it a bit, people round it a lot. So if we set the bar up here, people generally come in here. If we set the bar here, people generally come in here. Big difference, and that can really make the world of difference. So yes, you're going to tie yourself in a bit of knots mentally, trying to do something, but it's going to be for the better, and later you will reintroduce elements of bending. You will feel free to bend. Just like, sorry about the sandwich truck, just like if you've sprained your wrist, it's stiff for a while it's injured, right? And then all of a sudden, or slowly over time, like for example, I'll say it again because it's just a useful example of an injury. The 2 meniscus injuries that I had on my knee 2 months ago, my knee was stiff, it would not bend. And now, lo and behold, it bends again because it's going through a healing process. Right? It's going through a healing process. So as the tissues heal, you can start bending them again. You don't need to force the bending. Now, sometimes there is the need to add in some extra mobility work, in the future. But right now, as you're going through, that should be possibly, maybe I'll do that once I've built some strength. Not the fundamental thing that you start doing, as so many as you do. Oh, your back's stiff, you've just injured it. Go and do some knee hugs, some child's pose. Rock your knees left and right. Twist that thing as much as you can. Get it moving again. No, that's not what's going on here. It's not stiff for no apparent reason. The thing's stiff because you've injured it, right? And understanding that is really important. Jeffrey has said, I bad sciatica from an S1 herniated disc. Important to verify there. Is it L5-S1? Or are we saying that we've got a lumbaralization of the sacrum? And there we do have a S1 disc, which would be atypical. Muscle loss is getting better, but my back is starting to feel really unstable. Already had one surgery, don't want another one. Jeffrey, I'd make sure you're doing the right sort of rehab work. If you're in the program or if you're not in the program, have a look at it. You need to have structure. Muscle loss doesn't get better on its own. You drive muscle loss, right? You start using the muscles to protect the spine. That is fundamentally what we're doing in the rehabilitation program and all the stuff that we're talking about. We are leveraging exercises such as the squat, the hip hinge, the dead bug and the marching bridge in their early days to rebuild strength and resilience in the musculature around here. First, we're getting competent at the exercises so we can safely do them. then we are using a safe form, which will get better still over time, to start to find the right difficulty of those exercises to actually challenge the muscles. Whenever we get people in the phase 1 of the program who've just started and they're doing 10 squats, they don't finish rep number 10 and go, oh God, I couldn't do another 2. No way. They finish 10, and if I stood there and said, good, do another 10 right now, they would do it. Right? So they're not working at the right intensity, but they're learning, and that's perfectly fine. But then you need to graduate to the point where you are using that good technique to actually challenge yourself. That's how you build muscle. You don't build, if it's not hard, you're not doing anything. In so much as it might not be the right time to do things at the right intensity because you're still working on your technique, right? We put the intensity stuff at phase 3 of the program, not phase 1, phase 3, not phase 2, phase 3. But you do need to get to phase 3 and have a strategy for getting there safely, so that when it comes time, then we build muscle tissue. And so we build muscle tissue to make this area more and more resilient to strain as the discs are healing, as the structures are healing in the lower back. And then later on, as we get to the back end of recovery, we are using the very strain that we are putting through the discs and through the spine on our exercises, particularly the squat and the hip hinge as 2 of the safest, to start to strengthen up the disc itself. And that's what we do. And that's verified by the fact that before you were doing 15 kilos, and now you're doing 35, 40, 50, 70, 80, 100 kilos, whatever, wherever you are on that line, right? It's very clear that if you could only do 20 before, and now you're doing 60 without aggravation, because you knew that before 30 kilos did aggravate you, and you're now able to do 80 without aggravation, well, this has strengthened. This is not load bearing, right? The weight isn't circumnavigating and skipping out L5, S1 that's injured. It's going through there, and it now can tolerate that without flaring up, without creating significant re-aggravation, because it's gone through a healing process. But the healing process is slow, and that's why quick gimmicks to fix your sciatica in 3.5 minutes are not doing anything to fix anything. They're just gimmicks. Healing does take time, and strengthening and healing is very difficult to tell you where the healing process stops and strengthening continues, because from day 1, healing is improving the strength and resilience of that segment of the spine that's been injured. And so, hopefully that makes a bit of sense. What else have we got here? 3rd year, disc herniation pain on and off, so a chiro 1 year still not cured. The chiro isn't going to cure you. That's really important, right? Nixie, the chiro is not curing you. And the chiro hopefully isn't saying that they're curing you. They're hopefully saying something like, hey, Nixie, you're coming into me, you've got really bad disc herniation at L5-S1. And what we're going to do is we're going to get you doing some rehab stuff at home that's going to objectively build the load tolerance there. And as you're progressing, you're going to come into the clinic and we're going to do some work to keep your neck moving as well as possible, your thoracic spine moving as well as possible, your hips, knees and ankles as well as possible, so they can take strain off so your lower back can focus on getting better. And you're doing stuff outside the clinical environment that's reinforcing what we're doing in here and building resilience around that area to protect it further between sessions. So when you come in for your chiro appointment, we build on what you're doing at home rather than just doing something that's temporary, right? Because the effectiveness of the chiro is going to be temporary. You're going to stiffen up in certain areas, right? If someone does massage, if you go to a masseuse and you go back to them a month later, like, you're tight again, right? Because you've used your body. You get stiff again because you've used your body. You go to jiu-jitsu, for example. My neck hurts a little bit because I got cranked that way a little bit the other day. So they come and they clean everything up a little bit. They get it moving again, the areas that are a bit stiff and stuck. But the chiro can only move things. They can't tighten things up. And that's your job at home. And the tightening, the strengthening, the support is your job at home. And so there, it sounds like the expectation perhaps was not necessarily quite on par with what the reality is with regards to the help of the chiro. Left leg is shorter than the right, lower left back hurts, feels like it needs to be stretched. Also, a lot of people will have some disparity leg lengths. It's only worth really talking about them if you've had them measured on a standing x-ray. Otherwise, it's just so inaccurate. Measuring them on a bench, clinic bench. Like, the top of the leg finishes here, it doesn't finish out here. Right? So if you're measuring from here down to there, it's inaccurate. It's not going to be accurate. Where exactly on this bony bit that's all the way out here are you actually measuring from and to? It's just not accurate at all, and not worthy of making any changes based on that kind of thing. I've had no back pain, but prolapsed 3 discs, sciatica in the left leg. There you go. There's a great example. One of you guys that's injured your back. We've got verifiable discs at a number of levels in the lumbar spine. We have back pain. These things do happen, and it doesn't mean we need to do anything different, because our symptoms vary, but the cause is the same. So we address the cause. We don't worry about the symptoms. I mean, we worry about the symptoms because they hurt. But we don't need to worry about tailoring anything to the symptoms. Relief-based work, you'll find that some things help more than others. But do you know what helps all of these issues, all of these symptoms? Getting better. Healing helps more or less all of them, right? And it helps them pretty quick. There might be some bits of the symptoms that lag, and we can't control that. But if we go through the rehab and we rebuild and heal those tissues, or support the natural healing that's taking place, I should say, then we're going to do better. How can I stretch my glute when I'm still early in the flare-up so I can't do a floor leg over the knee? You're focusing on the wrong thing. One of the big changes that we made to the program when we did this massive overhaul at the start of September, it's obviously been a good number of months in the making. One of the big things was just moving the relief work, such as glute stretch, for example, out of the way. Because people would wrongly just keep on doing the relief work. I know we have our old phase 1, which was just a relief routine, which might be where we've seen this, right? It was doing some stretching of the glute. And people will do that and say, I'm going to do this until I get better. It's like, no, you've missed the idea. You do strengthening at the same time as some of these stretching things. If you can't effectively hip hinge, then you're probably allowing the glute stretch to leak into your lower back, which is one of the reasons why you struggle to do the glute stretch, as an example. Now, there might be other reasons as well, but you focus on the strengthening work. That allows you to be able to do the stretching and benefit from it more. SS has said, I'm 30 years old, I have a collapsed disc. My surgeon wants to perform a spinal fusion, but I don't know. I would always, when we're talking about spinal surgery, especially if we're given options, I would always be getting a couple of different opinions, probably from different outfits. And what I mean by that is, don't go to the spinal surgeon in room 501 and then the spinal surgeon in room 502. Go to a different building, like a different company, because different clinical establishments, hospitals will have different viewpoints. And so that just gives you the best chance to get a better understanding of how necessary the surgery is. Here's a clue as to how necessary the surgery might or might not be. If you've been given the option of trying injections for a while, that means that it's not severe, as a general rule, because injections do precisely nothing for the actual injury, and therefore their suggestion is, okay, well, maybe we're focused a bit more on the symptoms. If there is a mechanical reason to do an emergency surgery, then you will not have really had so much of a choice in the matter. You wouldn't be commenting on TikTok, generally speaking, right? There are exceptions, I appreciate that, but hopefully that makes a bit of sense. S. Morphy says, do we talk to you directly in the program? Do we have a call, and how often? So the program has support members area, and the program we do lives as well, obviously, so you guys can post questions and comments there. And obviously there's all of the material, which is all filmed, video-based content. Some people will use a virtual consultation, which you can purchase separately. But primarily, of the many members, very few feel the need to do any calls or come into the clinic nowadays, anyway, because it's so robust. You've got the strategy, everything you need to do, which leads from one phase into the next. You've got all of the education that's there for you to learn. Then you've got the tutorial videos. There are many of them, and the live workout, and then you've got the members area where people do post videos and support and questions and this, that, the other. So we reply to all of those and give members support in that area. And then if you've done all of that and you still need a bit of support or want that extra bit, it's still there for you, right? But it's such an ineffective use. At the end of the day, we want to make things accessible for you guys, right? So is it really worthwhile you having a call when you could just watch the educational material and learn it, right? And that makes, unfortunately, for a less productive call for you, it's less value for you. And also, it's less fun, right? Whereas we do calls from time to time where the person's actually, or in-person appointments from time to time, where the person's been through everything and they're coming in, they're in phase 3, and we're doing some real strategy, and it's really fun, right? It's really enjoyable because the person knows everything. And they're just looking for a little extra helping hand in some areas to give them a bit of confidence, right? But what I find really frustrating is when people want to have a call before they join the program. And then we end up talking about the basic stuff, and I'm like, man, why is this person paid all this money for an appointment when they could have just joined the program and all these questions are answered in the early stages of the program? Instead, they could do that and then get a call later on, and we can have a FaceTime, and we can talk about fun stuff that's really going to be strategic for them, because you've got to do the basics. You've got to do the basics. That's very, very important. So yeah, you can have them as often as you want, but I would strongly suggest get stuck into the program. And then if you feel the need for a call as well, I think you'll find, it's a very, very, very good program. There is tons there. It walks you through everything, and we have support literally every single day. So Yeah, we're really proud of what we built. Like this new release and the stuff that's coming the end of this month as well to add on. Like it's really, really robust. You won't find anything else like it in terms of like the structure of a rehabilitation program to get you back better. Can I use dumbbells for weights and a weighted vest instead of barbell? Yes, you can. That's one of the things that we recommend, right? For a lot of you guys, you should always start out with dumbbells, right? You can do the goblet squat variation, obviously, you can do, like so. You can do this is a very good variation to do, right? And you guys can possibly see, just in the corner, there is a weighted vest there. So combining this, 20 kilos, with 20 kilos on the weighted vest, perhaps, is a great option to allow you to continue to progress without the need for a barbell. And so, that's really worthwhile bit of gear if you're working out at home. Now, if you're able to work out in the gym, then we could make the case maybe it's not so necessary. But yeah, definitely, that's one of the things we recommend, particularly for those working out at home. Investing in some adjustable dumbbells and a weighted vest can be a really good combination to allow you to have this kind of scalability that you need to really rebuild your back for the long term. What have we got here? Mel Meshel has said, so with time after healing, tight hamstrings, glutes, halves, so two things here. Number one, a lot of people with bad backs had probably tight hips beforehand. They had tight hamstrings, they had tight calves beforehand, and they weren't stretching them. That's an important thing to note, right? So there may well be some residual tightness. It's not at all unheard of. If you were someone who was bendy, twisty, and you were going to all sorts of yoga classes, often actually, objectively, you have plenty of flexibility in the hamstrings. One of the group that really struggle with the stretching side of things is those actually you've got more than enough objective flexibility there, right? So you think about that. The nice thing about the hips is you can actually get much more accurate representations of how much flexibility we do have compared to normal hip mobility. So for example, how much should we do on a straight leg raise test? How much internal and external rotation? How much flexion should we have? How much extension should we have at the hip joint? And we can kind of get a pretty good idea of those. And there are a lot of people that are in the category where they feel those muscles are really tight, but actually they have good flexibility. But if in the instances where we do have reduced flexibility, understand that when you've got an injury to the lower back, there are signals going from these areas that are injured out to those muscles telling them to tighten up. The stretching has very limited value. And as the signals stop going to the muscles telling them to tighten up, so they are dysfunctional, you will find that they stop feeling so tight all the time. And as you make progress on the strengthening, they stop feeling so tight all the time. Now, is there the scenario where you still need to do a little bit of stretching to weed that stuff out? Yes. If you're part of the program, you're doing that sort of stretching stuff anyway. And what often happens, frequently happens, is as you progress through the program and you're building strength and stability, you're finding that your stretching work is actually having more of a cumulative effect. So it kind of gets dealt with anyway as you're going through the process. Not only is the healing decreasing the descending dysregulation or dysfunction of those muscles, making them tight artificially, you're also actually doing some stretching work, and the stretching work is allowed to start to be more cumulatively beneficial because the injury is starting to go through that healing process more effectively. Danish said, my back is never straight after the injury. I bend from my upper back now. I don't know what to say there, to be honest. Yeah, have a look at the rehab you've done. Make sure you're doing the right sort of stuff. And it's very common to have these sorts of antalgic postures. They will clear if you're doing the right rehab as you go through a recovery process. What else have we got in here? How heavy do we need to go with squats and hip hinges? I have a very chill lifestyle. So we discussed this at the start of the live stream. It needs to be tailored to each individual, but as a good ballpark target for guys, we talk about aiming for 100% of the body weight on the bar or in the squat or hip hinge. So if you're doing a squat or hip hinge and you weigh 90 kilos as a guy, you want to be doing 90 kilos. You want to get to the scenario where you don't feel worried about being exposed to 90 kilos in a squat or hip hinge for 10 reps. You can do it aggravation-free with correct choreography. That is a good level of spinal strength and resilience. You know for a fact that this stuff is stronger than it was before when you could not. And you've built a good level of resilience. Is there a chance you're going to be exposed to 120 kilos? Yeah, maybe. Like say you had to move the fridge and you fell funny and you moved awkwardly, or you helped your friend with a sofa. Yeah, some of that stuff might happen, right? But you've built a good level. You're not invincible, but you've built a good level. For ladies, we talk about that 75% of body weight. So let's just say you were 60 kilos. We'd want to be around about 45 kilos. I think the maths is right there. 75% of that body weight on the bar if you're doing a squat, or it could be whatever load equipment that you're using. And you should feel no fear around that. You should feel happy with that. You've done it countless times. So you're perfectly ready for anything in daily life to put you under strain. And that's going to indicate that you have a good level of strength and stability in the lower back. Fabio said, I had an L45 herniated disc. It seems like it's getting better now. Awesome. Fabio, I know you've commented on some of our stuff before. Get in the program. Get in the program and make robust progress on the rehab front, right? So many people fall into this category if they're not doing the rehab, and they go from one episode to another without doing any rehabilitation. They go, oh, it feels like it's getting better. Yes, because healing happens every single day. And if you manage to stop messing it up by being a little bit more careful and maybe listening to some of the stuff we talk about with regards to a neutral spine, the body will patch up. That's an automatic process. But all too often people go, it's be healed now. And therefore they crack back on, and then 6 weeks later, boom, they're back in a lot of pain again. It happens all the time. And it's like, how many times does that have to happen before we realize we need to actually do rehabilitation? We need to actually do some strengthening work. Because in the time that you've been less active, because of your L5-S1 disc herniation, the strength of the other areas has been less stimulated, let's say. And so you're going to have some degree of degradation of general muscle mass, general physical strength, general resilience in the bones, the joints, etc. And so you're kind of step changing from one flare up to the next if you're not actually doing rehabilitation work. So you need to do these things with intent to rebuild strength and resilience back into the lumbar spine. And it's great. Some of you guys will feel better. I think sometimes it's almost a gift and a curse to feel better faster, because it sometimes decreases the motivation for you to actually do the rehabilitation work to build objective strength back in. And then it leads people to asking the question, well, how do I know I'm healed? It's not based on how you feel, contrary to popular belief. You need the additional benefit of having your rehab work is that you know precisely how healed or strong your back actually is. And so you can then more effectively choose what real life activities you want to expose your spine to. If you have no idea of how healed or strong it is, and then your friend asks you to help him move a sofa this bank holiday weekend, whatever, not that it is a bank holiday weekend, then you don't really have a clue. But if you know that you're only at 20 kilos on your squats because 22 and a half last weekend was quite difficult, then you maybe think twice. Fabio said that's happened. That's why I ask again. It means the disc will be like this forever. No, Fabio, it means you have to do the rehab work. You have to do the rehab work, right? You have to do the rehab work to build strength and resilience. If you're not doing that and you're just going on how you feel, the disc doesn't care how you feel. You have to build back verifiable strength and resilience. And that's why your rehab is there, right? That's what you've got to do. It's not about how you feel. So many, understand, you don't have a very good awareness of the inner layers of these discs, which is why back pain of a severe sort often creeps up on people. You don't know often when these early degradations are actually happening in the disc. You don't feel that. It's only when it starts to get to the outer layers, because we don't have innervation to the deeper layers of the disc. We don't feel it. And so it's how the process of the rehab is so wide-reaching. It's not just about doing some exercises a couple times a day or a couple times a week. It's about getting an intimate understanding of the current resilience of your lumbar spine as is demonstrated in your most recent exercises. And the idea long-term is that your exercises are so very strenuous, expose you to so much force, that the chances of you coming through that in daily life are so unlikely. So you're very, very resilient. The chances of, Half-Thor coming into contact with 510 kilos as he deadlifted the other week or the other month is highly unlikely. He's not going to be injured by picking up a bottle, right? But so many of you guys are, which demonstrates you do not have good strength, health, or well-being in the lumbar spine, in spite of the fact that you might feel okay. It's always better to start the rehab work before you injure your back. That's always the best time, if you honestly have not been putting time into this stuff, right? But the second best time is to start when you injure your back, right? And then have it as a turning point in your life to start to commit to resistance training, because it's got so many wide-reaching benefits, psychologically, physically, everywhere, that everybody should be doing it. I've heard people say all the time, and I think Peter Attia talks about it in his book Outlive, which is an older book now. Like if resistance exercise and some cardiovascular exercise was a pill, it would be sold out all the time. It requires hard work and discipline. And that's what needs to be done. We need to use this back injury as a point to propel us into understanding that actually it doesn't have to be too time consuming, but it does need to be done. James has said, just seen your post video saying if you have a strong back, you're less likely to re-herniate a disc from bending forwards, etc. Picking up, let me rephrase that for you, James. You don't have a strong back if you herniated a disc, bending forward, picking up a water bottle. You didn't have a strong back. That's just evident, self-evident. Yeah. Measure says, so if I can move my leg, foot, toes and have strength but still have back pain, is it healing or healed? I have no idea. I think we've maybe missed something. How you feel is not what we care about. Measure. Go back and re-listen to like the last literally 7 minutes of the video, of the live, and just reconstitute that. Like healing is about having healing and strengthening are exactly the same thing fundamentally. It's very difficult to say where one stops and the other begins. And so you need to not work. Your rehab will reveal how healed you are, how recovered you are. And what you'll notice as you progress through your rehab, the symptoms start to go away. And as you progress through strengthening, your symptoms start to go away. If you're still struggling with symptoms and you're at like 100 kilo squat, right? It just doesn't happen, right? It just doesn't happen. Yes, there might be yes, there often are instances where you're making progress and you still got some symptoms, right? That happens frequently because healing does take time. And there might still be, or there still will often be inflammation in the lower back as you're going through that process. But you need to focus on rebuilding strength and resilience into your lower back, and that is the marker of how healed you are or are not. Owen said, should I do core twice a day or 3 times a day? The best thing I could suggest is follow the rehab stuff that we talk about in the program, Owen. You do your rehabilitation exercises, which is not just core. Well, it is core, but it's quite core. My concern with that question is that the fact that we're saying core exercises or core twice a day implies we're doing stuff like just dead bugs and marching bridges and stuff like that. And dead bugs and marching bridges are in the core 5, right? But there's also squats and hip hinges. And my concern is that you're just doing a couple of exercises that are quote unquote for the core, as opposed to proper core exercises, which include load-bearing exercises, because people forget the core has a core to it and it's called the spine. And we have to train that. And lying on the floor doesn't train that. So that's a very, very important point. When you're early starting with your rehab, Owen, you're going to do rehab a couple times a day, right? Because you're learning the exercises. But once you've learned how to do them, you then put them into a workout that you do once a day. And then you progress that workout over time. Mejal has said, is it a monthly subscription? Go and check out the link here, Mejal. There we go, boom. Watch the video there. That explains more about the program. It's a monthly subscription, yes. You're best off just accessing it through the website. Super easy, super eeasy. Follow the phase 1, 2, 3, and 4. It's great. And you stay with us as long as you want, right? There's no minimum commitments or anything like that. You pay monthly. If you want to switch over to yearly because you like what we do and you want to stay with us for a longer period of time, then you can do yearly, save 25%. But yes, there's no minimum contracts, right? You either pay for a month, we pay for a year, boom, done. And you can cancel at any time, you can rejoin. We have many, like everyone's got a different budget, right? We appreciate that not everyone can afford to have that subscription running all the time. So some members will jump in, they'll stay for a month or 2, then they'll dip out, they'll carry on working, then they'll come back in a month or 2, dip out. Like that's perfectly fine, right? Others, actually they just want to keep the subscription rolling because they value the support and they can afford to, right? It's everybody for everybody, right? You just figure out what works best for you and then we're there to help. James has said, what was this? Post a video saying having a strong back will make a reherniation less likely. Yes, that is exactly the idea, James. You posted that on YouTube as well. Awesome. Alison said, I just signed up. I'm only on the first exercise of the first phase, feeling so much better. Oh, awesome. That's cool, Alison. Yes, Alison said, I'm only on the first exercise of phase 1. So I'm assuming that's probably the dead bug. You've been working around with that. Awesome. Make sure, Alison, when you're starting out with the program, you're working on finding your variation, as we discuss in the tutorials, of each of those exercises to find what you can do aggravation-free, not pain-free, right? Because some people, I don't know about you, Alison, but definitely get into the members group or the Facebook group and post a little update so we can guide you more effectively. But some people will have pain all the time. And so that's why it's aggravation-free. We don't want to get spikes in aggravation during an exercise because if we're doing, for example, the dead bug and we're on the floor and we've got no pain, no aggravation, and I bring the second leg up and my back arches. Oh, that hurt, right? Then there's aggravation. So I need to try again, see if okay, now I can do it. And then as my leg goes out, I get to this point and my back starts to arch. Oh gosh, that's painful. Okay, we have to rein it in a bit. Do an easier version until we find the one we can do aggravation-free for 10 reps. And then we put that into the workout. So you'll find, Alison, you'll find that for each of the individual exercises. And also remember, Alison, you're not just learning the exercises to learn the exercises. You're learning the exercises because it teaches you how to control this in the real world. So you're, every single day, you're becoming safer and safer and safer because you're more aware of these things. Yes, you're going to make some mistakes when you learn some of the new exercises. Maybe the hip hinge, you struggle with that. Very, very normal. We're there to help you, right? But gradually you'll get better and better and better at these things. That's going to have spillover benefits into the daily life. Technique improves very quickly if you are sincerely, and lesson for everybody else, if you're sincerely working at these exercises, recording yourself, taking notes, technique can improve literally within a day and certainly within a week, which has huge spillover benefits. And then you're onto the strengthening and building that. And that obviously takes a little bit longer because we're talking about literally your body building new tissue. But we're there to help. So Alison, awesome, you're already noticing some differences. A lot of those early differences are just that you guys are starting to learn what you didn't know. And then executing that stuff into your daily life decreases the aggravation and the flare-up. So thanks for sharing, Alison, and get into the members group, give us an update, and that's really cool. Really cool that you're doing well. And don't forget that core relief work alongside, really important. Oh man, it looks like I've actually already gone over an hour. Oh, we're getting close, okay. TikTok does it at a different time every time. Okay, guys, we've got about 5 more minutes. So I'm going to try and rattle through some of these questions that are on TikTok over here. And if there's any more that come up on YouTube, guys, I'll go through those as well. Frankie said, I've got a question. I just watched your masterclass video this morning. Yeah, it's a long one. Hopefully you found it helpful. Oh, no, I lost that. Where are we? Yes, okay. How often should I do the exercises and what to do and how can I... when I can't get relief with the towel. I definitely have a look, Frankie, at some of the core relief stuff, the back pain relief routine that we've got on the TikTok playlist. But honestly, I would just have a look at the program. Go and check out the link in the profile page. But generally speaking, like we've been saying on the live today, when you're starting out doing the exercises, like Alison's doing right now, you play around with the individual exercises to learn how to do them. You do those multiple times a day. You've got your back pain relief stuff, right? It's not just the towel decompression, there's the bed decompression, there's lower body stretching, there's contrast bathing, you know, those kind of things are all there. Even just stopping doing the bad stuff is all very, very helpful. And you're doing that multiple times a day while starting to actually build strength and resilience into the back through learning those spine stabilizing exercises. And then you build from there, right? The relief, the towel is often a bit of a challenge for people when they start out. And that's completely normal, playing around with doing it on the bed, right? For some people, right, we're so vulnerable that the act of getting onto the floor is a challenge in of itself. And so that flared us up, right? You could even just get on the floor, lie down there and like, oh, my back's hurting. It's like, well, it's nothing to do with the towel. It's the fact that you can't get onto the floor. So one of the big workarounds for a lot of people when they start is actually you do the floor-based exercises or stretches, you do that on the bed because you getting on the floor isn't worth it, right? Because you just can't. You can't do that safely. Smorphy has said, is this rehab the same for someone with a grade 2 spondylolisthesis? Is it the same for all situations? If you have a human spine, then the rehab is for you. We've got a great example, Smorphy, and if anyone else has this condition, has a spondylolisthesis, send us a DM after this live session, and I'll send you a link to Janet's story. She's just out on the wall over there. In fact, I might be able to show you guys. I can't show YouTube, I'm sorry. But let me just take this out. I will just point it. Maybe you guys can see. Bear with me, YouTube, one sec. This wall over here. Just out there, right? That's where we have, sorry about that on YouTube. That's where we have the some of the covers of the magazines and bits and pieces, newspapers that some of our members have been on. The reason I mention that is because Janet was one of the members that had a grade 2 spondylolisthesis, and her story's there. And you might find it particularly helpful to read. So send us a DM, just say, hey Mike, can you send me Janet's story? And there's a bunch of other ones on the media page on the website of other members, and obviously the reviews page as well. Bruck has said, why not your videos are not saved? I'm not sure what we're asking there. I mean, I know what you're asking, but I don't know what you mean by saved. Why we don't let you download our videos, I'm not sure. I'm not sure that was an option, but I don't really want people downloading our videos. We have some people that download them, then re-upload them on like the YouTube channel and stuff, which is not cool. I used to do bodybuilding and I fear that this is over me. Fabio, it doesn't need to be over you. There's nothing you can't do. You just got to do the rehab, right? You've just got to do the rehab. A great story that will inspire some of you. I've mentioned it many times before. One of the ladies I used to do jiu-jitsu with, herniated disc in her lower back. I believe she had surgery on that disc and was back competing on the jiu-jitsu mats and obviously by definition doing strengthening work and rehab and bodybuilding type stuff, Fabio, within 9 months. So you can do it. It's just how long is it going to take you, right? And how disciplined are you? That individual is extremely, extremely disciplined from my knowledge. And you know, you do well. James has said, I've done mine from getting up out of a seat, build up to 50 kilos on the split squats. I'm 73 kilos. One of the things I would say, James, and this is, you know, it's great that you're building back up on the squats, which is awesome, on the split squats, which is awesome. But I do think that it's much safer to scale your max load on your squat and hip hinge because you don't have the balance component in there. I think scaling your highest weight should be significantly above what you're doing on your asymmetrical exercises because you've then got the variable of balance, right? Let's just say you lost your footing slightly and you failed. Like that's not the kind of scenario I would want when I'm testing max load or current max spinal loading. So I'd just be careful about that. Chris has said, I had a microdiscectomy 7 days ago, but I have a lot of pain in my right leg. Always, always. If you guys have just had surgery and you're getting symptoms, get back in contact with your surgeon. Say, hey guys, this is what I'm noticing. This is what I'm noticing. Is it normal? I haven't done your surgery, right? Speak to them, check it's normal, right? But I will say the guidance post-operation for microdiscectomy patients or spinal surgery is so poor. It's like, we're going to do this really important surgery that's really detailed, and then we're going to give you no guidance other than to wait 6 weeks for you to have physio. So in the window that you're most vulnerable, the guidance is most lax. It's like, yeah, so walk a bit, don't sit, don't twist, don't bend, and yeah, have fun, right? Wait for the physio appointment. And that's just really, really poor. And so I think focusing on spine stability work, we have many members that come through with microdiscectomies. Partially that's just because microdiscectomies are a common form of surgery, minimally invasive, etc. But yeah, I mean, we've got a recent video podcast. Chris, maybe send us a DM after this video and just say, hey Mike, can you send me a link to the microdiscectomy surgery podcast? But you know, the most important thing to understand with the discectomies or microdiscectomies is there are two problems that you have. There's a main problem, and then there's the problem you had the surgery for. The surgery, step back. This is a healthy disc. The nucleus is held in place by an intact annulus fibrosus. Fundamentally, the annulus fibrosus is what is strong in your spine. That is what is bearing load, okay? This is the disc material. If you've had a microdiscectomy to remove the disc herniation, the disc is here. The surgery addresses the problem that the disc is here and not where it should be. That is not the problem. The problem is that it's hammered through and ripped all of these layers of annulus, which now, after you've had the disc chopped away, are still broken. So if you're not given guidance on what to do, how to stabilize your spine, etc., then you're going to go on aggravating those poor little sections of annulus fibrosis. And that's going to be a real problem. And that's why, you know, the guidance needs to be there, I would argue. And many surgeons agree because many surgeons refer their patients to the program. But I would argue that it needs to be more front and center of like, you need to learn how to control the spine. And ideally you'd learn before you had the surgery, but certainly afterwards, because that's going to be something that you can do right after surgery when what you can do is quite limited. So just some things there, but go back and speak to the surgeon swiftly and then go from there. What have we got? Hartley has said, do you know much about osteoporosis? I mean, to a degree, it's obviously relevant, but I don't know what we're asking now or what the subsequent question will be. James, Fabio, you can do bodybuilding again. No, yeah, James is right? You got to just do the rehab, right? You got to put the time in. Fundamentally, everybody is doing bodybuilding in the program because they are building their body back up again. But you might need a bit of help, right? We've got to start in humble. Just because we've done bodybuilding over the years doesn't mean we have been doing things in the optimal way. Mark Parry has said, I have facet joint bone spurs at L5S1, get chiropractic adjustments every 6 weeks to alleviate hamstring pain. Is this advisable? In addition to strength, if you're doing strengthening work, proper strengthening work that is making objective change, you can make a good amount of progress in a 6-week period. So, you know, the question is, what strengthening work are we doing? I would argue that you should be doing primarily squats and hip hinges as a good mechanism for understanding whether or not you are actually effective in that strengthening. Strengthening is very, very easy, right? It's so easy to know if you're actually being effective because the loads go up, and they should definitely go up in a 6-week period. Very important. So just make sure, as long as you're actually making progress and you're doing proper strengthening work. Unfortunately, sometimes people get given strengthening and it's like doing some clamshells on the floor and some bridges, and that's not strengthening, right? That's not strengthening. Apart from if you've not been bedbound for some reason for an extended period of time, that might be strengthening. But strengthening is an outcome, not an exercise. I repeat, strengthening is an outcome, not an exercise. Many of you can do squats and may even have done squats before you joined the program, for example, or saw any of our stuff, but you weren't doing them to get a strengthening outcome. And so workouts need to be at the right kind of level, and that level changes over time in order to get a strengthening outcome. So the question there for Mark is, Mark, what are you squatting right now? And what were you squatting 6 weeks ago? And if the answer doesn't differ very much, then we haven't done strengthening. And so we need to have a think about that. So hopefully that makes sense. Questions on TikTok. Jade, guys, I'm going to wrap it up very shortly. So just a reminder, in case I wrap it up faster, because I've got other bits and pieces on today that needs to be done. We've got the live workouts, some additional live workout libraries that are rolling out at the end of this week. So those need to be finished up. A few bits and pieces, very, very cool stuff for the program. But if you need more help, link up here in the profile page if you're on TikTok. Those of you guys on YouTube, there's always going to be a link down in the description or in the pinned chat if you're watching this afterwards. I know many of you guys watch this after we've gone live. So check that out. Like, there's a video there that explains more about the program, a little bit of written instructions, and you can always reach out to us if there's a contact form on the website if you've got any specific questions, or you could join us on live and ask a question. But if you are struggling with back pain, sciatica, just get involved. It'll really help you. What have we got here? So what treatment would you recommend best for managing a disc bulge, for a mild disc bulge? You've had it 3 months. Everything we talk about, Jade. Go exactly what I just said to do. Go and do that right now. Go and have a look at the profile page. Watch the video there. That gives you what you need to do from a point of view of recovering. People say sciatica can't be fixed. It often isn't fixed, JP, if you're trying to fix sciatica. You need to fix the herniated disc or the injury to your lumbar spine. You don't fix sciatica, if that makes sense. I'm being a bit pedantic, but hopefully you get the idea with that one. JP, just get involved. I think you sent us a DM the other day. Just get involved in the program. Just get involved in the program. Start doing the right sort of stuff. Just doing some stretches is not rehab, right? It's just not rehab. Do proper rehab. I have sciatic pain. Is walking okay? Flowers, walking plays a relief-based role. Walking is not building you back up. Walking can be useful if you're walking within aggravation-free distances and you're pairing it with other relief-based strategies alongside strengthening. But walking is not fixing you. Do I need to do hamstring stretches because I struggle with hip hinges? You should be doing. So one of the things that we talk about in relief work, we have relief work and we have strengthening. Strengthening is exercises like the hip hinges, squats, etc. And then in the relief work, there's hamstring stretches in there as well, right? Hamstring stretches, hip flex stretches, glute stretches, the tau decompression, bed decompression, all of this stuff, right? That's core relief work. So you do those at the same time. But what you'll find is learning the hip hinge will make that other stuff better. The hip hinge is really the secret to that particular scenario. Fabio said, thank you a lot. You've helped me more than you can imagine. God bless you in your work. Thank you very much, Fabio. I appreciate that. Just hang in there. Get the work done, and you'll start to see things getting better. Emma said, do you have anything to help the cervical spine? Send us a DM afterwards. We've got a good podcast episode on whiplash, which talks about other stuff around the neck, which should hopefully be helpful. We do have a neck pain relief program as well, but watch that whiplash episode first. What else have we got here? Awesome. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. I've overrun, as usual. But hopefully it's been helpful, guys. If you've got any more questions, need any more support, check out the website, backinshapeprogram.com. And guys, thanks for joining. I'll see you next time, probably later this week. Lovely. Guys on YouTube, again, thank you. And see you next time. Bye, guys.